All right. We're going to go ahead and get started at this time. Thank you guys so much for coming out. As you guys can see on the screen, our session today is on moving out and moving on. Moving out and moving on. And so the emphasis is on how to maintain healthy family relationships, as you do these things. But before we get into it, let's just go ahead and start with maybe some brief introductions. Mike, Natalie, just briefly introduce yourself.
Absolutely. We are glad that you all are here. I will let my wife do most of our family introduction, kind of tell a little bit about who we are. But Mike and Natalie Strofe, and we've been a part of Liberty now for a little over a year and a half. We've kind of crisscrossed the country in vocational ministry, been in Louisville, Kentucky, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Northern California. But God brought us here about a year and a half ago to be a part of this ministry, and we're excited to be here with you all today. And I'm sure we'll jump into all the questions. But I think our heart, when they asked us to do this, we obviously were super excited because at least here at Liberty, we see that the growth that is happening and the excitement and the energy with the young adults is amazing. And so we're like, absolutely, let's pour into, we say the next generation. We don't feel that far removed from being young adults, but we're not there anymore. But we are appreciative that you all are here. And if we can give you one bit of advice as we jump in, you just sat through an amazing Q&A panel. There's this session, and then you have a couple of more. It can be information overload at times, and you're like, I wrote down 7,000 things, and I'm going to implement 47 of them tomorrow. Find one or two that you can do today, and I think that's how you guys will be the most help. But we're excited to be here, and thank you, Steve-O and RJ and Andy and all the people that are putting this on. So that's a little about us. I know my wife will kind of tell us about who we are.
My name is Natalie, and we've been married for 14 years, and we have 4 kids. And just like Mike said, we're so excited to be with you guys. We love the young adults. We were just talking to Steve-O, and we're like, we're right now, our era is middle schoolers, where they come home with a different word and it means something so not what it really is supposed to mean, and we're just trying to keep up. And then we came in today and we're like so used to just, here we go, and then we're like, oh yeah, young adults, we get to be chill for a little bit. We get just to kind of take our time. So we're so excited to be with you guys today. We're in your corner. We have sat where you guys have been, and it's just our heart today that you guys learn from our mistakes. So maybe it's just a little less mistakes that you guys make, learning from ours, hopefully learning a little bit of some of the things that we did do right. But we're here cheering you guys on. It's our prayer that every single person sitting in here today is successful in life and successful within their Christian walk and all that God asks you guys to do. But we love life, we love serving Jesus, and we love that we just get to be with you guys today.
All right, let's go ahead and jump into it then, guys. All right, so moving out and moving on. Moving out and moving on. Obviously, we're not just talking about changing where you live or moving out of your parents' house, although it does involve that. Just by raise your hands, how many of you guys still live with your parents? You guys still live at your parents' house? How many of you guys have already moved out of the house? Okay, so it's a pretty even split. But, the concept of moving out and moving on, not just talking about changing where you live, but specifically in your young adult years, you guys are going to, maybe you guys already know this, there's so many major life decisions that you make during this time. Like even for me, in the last couple of years, I got married. That was huge. I dove into my career. Like those are major life decisions, and they happen. A lot of these major decisions happen in your young adult years. And so, with that in mind, you start to realize that there's changing dynamics with relationships. So now how I relate to my mom is differently now that I have a spouse, And so your friendships change. The friends that you had in high school, maybe you're starting to realize, hey, they don't reach out to me anymore. And so a lot of these things change. And so this is kind of what the session is going to be focusing on, like how do we handle that? But before we kind of get to there, I think we got to focus first on who we're becoming. So more on identity, and we've broken it up into 3 segments today. The first one's on embracing adulthood. And so first question today, and I'll ask both of you guys this, but what would you guys say marks the beginning of adulthood?
I think that can be summarized in a lot of different ways. I understand, as you mentioned, Steve-O, the need for this topic as we're making huge major life decisions as we're coming out of high school, college, and into our adult life. Can we also ask the question, I know we just said, how many of you live with your parents? Hopefully if you live with your parents, you're not married. But is there anybody that is married in here? Anybody married in the room? A couple? Okay. Anybody dating? There's a few. Okay. That helps us frame kind of some of the questions that we have moving forward. But I understand the need for it. I think as you talk about what identifies, marks the beginning of adulthood, I think it's important to understand God is not necessarily concerned with when you move out of your parents' house. He's more concerned with who you're becoming as a person. And I think we associate adulthood with an age, and it's not necessarily an age. It is you taking responsibility for who you are becoming as a person. And that can actually be different ages. I think, Natalie might talk in a minute of, if you're young and you had there's a lot of things that happened in your childhood and you had to kind of grow up quickly, you can kind of become an adult at a younger age. And so it's not necessarily an age. I think it's you becoming who God wants you to be and taking ownership and identity for that for yourself. And we teach a couples class here, a group on Wednesday nights, and there are some times it's conversation based, and we'll hear a couple and they'll be talking out loud and talking about some things they're going through, and we think to ourselves like, I think you could use a little bit of growing up. So it's not necessarily when I move out, when I graduate college, when I'm married. I think it really is, when I am going to take full responsibility for the decisions that I'm making, and I can do that on my own. We're going to I can't wait to jump into some of the theological and the biblical aspects of that in a little bit, but I don't think it's necessarily an age. What do you think?
No, I think culture tells us naturally becoming adult is when you turn 18 legally. You can make your own decisions. You don't need your parents' consent for anything. And I think also culture would tell us when you graduate high school, that's when you become an adult. So I think that's a normal mindset of, hey, I'm entering the next chapter of my life. I'm done with high school. I've got some major decisions to make. These next decisions will affect the rest of my life. Yeah, that would be adulthood for sure.
That's good. So why do you guys think that the age for adulthood is delayed compared to past generations?
Yeah, I think that, I'm going to give a couple ideas on this. I think that it can definitely look and feel delayed to a certain extent because of a couple of normal factors, right? Everything today costs more than it did 15 years ago, 20 years ago. So financial independence is taking a little bit longer. I think for us, comfort is more accessible than ever. Comfort at home, comfort with friends, comfort with our people. And so I'm like, I'm going to stay as comfortable as I can until I actually really have to move out or I have to figure these things out on my own. So I think that it is delayed. I also don't want that to become a crutch for us, though. I mean, like, if we think of how is it delayed, compared to what? Like compared to 100 years ago, like Ma and Pa on the farm. Like I don't. At what point are we considering it delayed? I think we just have to. It goes back to the first question of we just have to take responsibility for who we are, for who God is creating us to be, the decisions that I'm making, and then I understand we all want comfort, but there's a time where God is expecting us to continue to grow on our own. So I feel like it is delayed, but don't use it as a crutch. I think that we still need to build ourselves out on that.
I don't really think it is delayed. I think, yes, maybe 75 years ago when people are getting married at 14, 15, 16, both of my parents are turning 70 this year, and they had a normal childhood, out of high school, went to college, just how I was raised, how we're raising our kids. I don't know that necessarily adulthood itself is delayed. I think parts of adulthood are delayed. When I was graduating college, it was like, you should be married right fresh out of college. That's unheard of now. And if you get married in your 20s, it's almost like, why are you doing that? You're just starting life, right? And I think marriage has been delayed where we're now seeing people getting married well into their 30s. We're seeing people have kids halfway through their 30s into the 40s. We forgot really dear friends who are older than us, and they've got kids who are 2 and 3, and our kids are 13 and 12. So I don't think necessarily adulthood as a whole is delayed. I just think there are certain aspects are delayed. And we're not even saying that those are even, that's not even a negative thing. It definitely would have pros and cons to it, but it's not necessarily a negative way of life for sure.
That's good. Okay, let's get right into our next question. When did you guys realize that your parents were no longer responsible for the direction of your life? Let me ask you, Mike.
Yeah, I would say, let me also say this. I meant to say this in the beginning. With the amount of questions that we're going to try to get through in the next probably 40 minutes or so, 35 minutes, we're not going to be able to take every answer and dissect it as much probably as we want to. And we want to give you time for Q&A. So if there's something that you think of, jot it down or see us afterwards, because we're going to try to run through these as quick as we can. But the question again, Steve-O, was what? Say it again.
When did you realize your parents were no longer responsible for the direction of your life?
Yeah, I don't know that, I mean, I didn't wake up one day and be like, oh my goodness, like everything is now on me. I think it's it's like anything else in life. It's a gradual progression. I think you could break that down into a couple of different categories, right? I think for me, spiritually, I got saved. I asked Jesus Christ to be my Savior at a young age. But then it was a lot of just kind of depending on my parents and church and all of that all the way through high school. And it wasn't until I was halfway through college and I realized, man, my faith is not going to work by just running on my parents' faith anymore. I'm going to have to make these decisions for myself. I have to choose who I'm going to be as a person, my relationship with Christ. What does that look like? And it doesn't matter if my parents walk with God, if they go to church, if they're not, if they're bad people, good people. That's on me now. And so I think spiritually it was in college. I think you can look at financially, right? I think that happens to all of us when the bills actually start coming and they actually have our name on it and we actually have to start paying. And so I think that there's a couple different ways to look at it, but I think we're going to dive a little bit deeper, I think, in a little bit into what the Bible has to say about some of these topics. But I think that it's just understanding who we are and who we're becoming in Christ is probably the most important thing, because he actually develops and he grows us. You just mentioned earlier, Steve-O, okay, if we're growing or if there's a delay, what does that look like? And are there potential consequences to that? And my thought on that, and this is for all of us in the room, would be if the longer that we delay adulthood, I think we're delaying our own growth, right? There are consequences that come alongside of that. And so I think even in this, it's the longer that we hold on to these comforts and don't step out on our own, I think that there's definitely some negatives that could come from that. So I don't know if there was one exact specific moment, but I think if you break those down, it can happen at different times.
That's really good. Let me ask you a very pointed question, Natalie. But what mistakes do you think are common early on with stepping into independence? Maybe mistakes that you made?
Yeah, well, I definitely made a lot of mistakes. I'm not going to share them all with you today. We don't have time for that. But that's part of life. We're all going to make mistakes, and that's okay. We learn from them. When you enter adulthood, you're really young, and you're making adult decisions. And every decision has a consequence, positive or negative. I think one common mistake when we do enter adulthood, when we say leave high school, graduate high school, maybe we move out, and maybe like half of us are still at home, and that's okay too. I think a common mistake that we get is, well, I'm on my own now. I'm 18, or I'm doing life on my own. I'm going to school, I have my job, I'm doing my thing now. And we actually tend to isolate. I don't need my parents as much. I picked up a job on the weekend, so I don't have my church community as much. And I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And we slowly and surely start to isolate ourselves. And I truly believe the devil can do his greatest work when we're isolated from our church, our community, our family, who are all good, positive people in our corner. Yes, we want to do life on our own. We don't want to do life alone, though. And so think where you are right now. And if you've noticed that maybe you have distanced yourself with your schedule, with different things, don't do life alone. Another common mistake would definitely be financial instability. If you've got a job, you're out doing your thing, and it's like, I'm going to get my Starbucks, I'm going to get my matcha, I don't want to cook. I am 40 and I don't want to cook. Anytime my husband says, you want to go out to eat? I'm like, yes, let's go out to eat. And we can't even go to McDonald's. It's $100 for our family of 6. So no, that's not smart financially at all. But I think that's such a common mistake, because we're just spending money left and right. We're able to either pay rent, or if we're living at home, we don't have that bill. And if I can give you any sort of encouragement, set yourself up financially. You are never going to regret having money in the bank. And set yourself a plan. So many times we just go through life blindly of, yeah, I got a job, yeah, I'm going to school. But and I'm not even saying have a 5 or 10 year plan. It's great to have those. Life shifts so much. I don't know how much you would stick to that, but still having a plan of, I'm going to save X amount per month. And for the year, I want to save 10 grand, or I want to save 5 grand. But set yourself a plan and then stick to it. I think another common goal would just be lack of self-control. And let me explain that. When we are on our own, so many times maybe it's after high school, I'm going to have a year to think about life. And that's not a bad thing if that's what you need. Or what am I going to do? And so many times we can be like, oh, I'll just figure it out. I'm going to stay out till 4 a.m., this and that. Again, no plan. Set yourself up for success. Set yourself up with some goals, and then constantly be assessing and adjusting. Mike and I still do this all the time. We've been married 14 years, and we've got 4 kids, and we go every 3 to 6 months, and we say, How did that work for us? We're assessing and adjusting. There was a time we both were working full-time. How did that work? It actually didn't work. And so then I went back to being home part-time. But we're constantly assessing and adjusting so you can set yourself up for success. If you are staying at home, that's not a bad thing at all. When I graduated college, I actually moved back home for 2 years. It actually is a really strategic plan to help you reach your goals, especially financially. When I moved back home, my parents didn't charge me rent. I was really grateful for that. That's not a free time to be like, sweet, I can get more coffee. No, be smart and save your money. So if you have the privilege to be at home, use that to your advantage of, I'm gonna save money, I'm going to have my schedule, but I get to be at home, which is huge right now. But the one common mistake about staying at home is I don't have a nice way to say it. Don't mooch off your parents. I don't know. When I stayed at home, it was just me and my mom and dad. So when my mom made dinner, she made dinner for the three of us. I would help out, but my mom was not doing my laundry. My mom was not cleaning my room. So if that's you here today, don't do that. Do your own laundry, okay?
Okay.
Don't mooch off your parents. Use it as a strategic step to launch you into adulthood in a healthy way. Yeah, if you have that opportunity, do it. But don't violate that either.
That's good. I definitely want to unpack that a little bit. Obviously, it's in our session title, Moving Out and Moving On. But what would you guys say, maybe some wise principles that these young adults can consider? Because I think more than half of them raised their hand when they said they live still at home with their parents, right? Maybe things that they can consider on when is a good time to potentially move out versus, staying at home with your parents.
Yeah, I think that depending on who you talk to, you're going to get different financial advice, and you're going to get different people. We are Dave Ramsey fans. If you haven't read any of his books, I would suggest you go do that. That really helped our marriage. I was not good with finances in high school, beginning of college, and then read some of his books and put some of those principles into place. And so I would, as she mentioned before, especially if you're at home, there's going to come a point in time where you're going to look back and be like, I wish I could go back and have less outflow of my cash, than what I do now. When you get married and have kids and all of the money starts to go out. And so I would just, like she mentioned, just be very, very smart on what that looks like and just have a plan and put it into place. I don't know that there's a specific, you have to have X amount of dollars. We all live around or in Orange County, which is crazy expensive. So I think that it's just being smart financially so where you can set yourself up for success later.
That's good. Okay, before we move into our second segment, let me ask you guys one final question. I think it's a really good one, but what character qualities do you think define a mature adult in God's eyes?
Yeah, I'll jump into this and I'll let you finish it up. I think it's important to understand, we mentioned this earlier, God does not view you as mature just because you move out of your parents' house. God doesn't view you as mature just because you get married.
That's it.
God views you as mature the more you become like him. And I don't know what your status is in life or even your church background. If you're like, I just came today and I've never been a part of a church. If you're like, I'm in church every week. If we look at what Scripture says, Galatians chapter 5, verse 22, the fruit of the Spirit, right? Love, joy, peace, long-suffering, patience, goodness, gentleness, meekness. If I just did discipleship this week with a fella, and inside the book, it literally says, how can you measure your growth in your Christian life? Growth being more mature. And you can literally measure that by asking yourself, how much am I becoming like Christ? And so I think you can look at yourself and say, what does God view as mature? It's not your age. It's not how much money you have in the bank. At the end of the day, and I think that's why we're here at the conference, is it's how much are you becoming like him? How much are your actions and interactions filled with love and joy and peace and patience? That's actually what God views as a spiritually mature person. It has nothing to do with how old you are.
Yeah, I don't think maturity has an age on it at all. We see so many examples in the Bible of really young kids stepping up into bold and courageous faith. You look at the life of David going to fight Goliath. He could have stayed with the Israelites in comfort, but he chose this huge decision at a really young age. You take the story of Esther, and she was a young girl, early 20s, and she chose to step up and to save her nation. So I don't think maturity has to do with an age. I think if you are looking for a sort of characteristic, I would probably say self-control. Right now, if you are run by your emotions, impulses, your cell phone, you're probably lacking self-control. But when you can have control and displaying control in your emotions, in your finances, in your dating, in your time, you're definitely headed in the right direction for sure. And just like Mike said, honestly, I think maturity in God's eyes is just Christ-likeness. Are you radiating Jesus in your relationships, in your work, in your college, within your family relationships? Do you radiate Christ within those areas?
That's good. Yeah, I love that thought that both of you guys kind of pointed out. Maturity isn't about age. Yeah, because we could have, a mature 18-year-old and you can have an immature 30-year-old, right? It's about taking responsibility for your life, taking ownership. I really like that. So, all right, let's move on to our second segment. And this one really, now we're kind of transitioning into family dynamics, relationship dynamics. And maybe you guys have already, maybe you started to realize this. As you become an adult, sometimes tension arises. Maybe you find your parents don't like, who you're dating. Like, things like that happen. And so these relationship dynamics, they need to change. So let me ask you guys this first question. How do family relationships need to change as we become adults?
Yeah, I love the idea, and I think that's probably why most of you stayed in the room today, was probably for this specific topic of handling family dynamics as you start to get older and you start to make decisions. Let me give you this encouragement that every single one of your relationships is meant to adjust over time. My wife and I think we've got a few pictures back there, Austin. We'll start throwing those up every couple of seconds up on the screen. Let me know when we've got that first one up there ready to go. Okay, so this was, young Mike and Natalie.
This is young adult?
This is us when we were young adults.
Okay.
So this is us dating, and you can cycle those every couple of seconds, Austin. So then we started to have children. We started with our first, Lincoln, and then we had our second, Sophia, and then we had our third, Lacey, and then we had our fourth, Carly. Stop here for a second. So as our relationship has grown over the last 15 years, it's needed adjustment. I don't treat her the same, and she doesn't treat me the same, and our relationship is not the same as it was 15 years ago. If I didn't adjust it, we would have problems. And now you can jump into the last one. Our kids are now, this was taken last Easter, and almost a year ago. So by this Easter, they might be taller than us. We've got a 13-year-old, a 12-year-old. I don't treat my 13-year-old like I did in his previous picture when he was 3, because he's not 3 anymore. Well, as you begin to grow and as you begin to find out what God has for you in your life, all of your relationships are going to need to adjust. And I want to give you two hopefully helpful thoughts on this. I think as you grow, there's 2 things you need to make sure that you're aware of. Number 1, your authority shifts. When you're a child, your parents are giving you all of the direction in your life. They are telling you what to do. As you begin to grow, and even if you're still living in their home, it doesn't necessarily mean that you've moved out, but it could be at that stage. It goes from your parents directing you to now your parents counsel you. It doesn't mean that you ignore them. It just means that the final responsibility now lies with you. That relationship has adjusted. It doesn't mean that you distance yourself from them. It just means that it's changed, and that's okay. The goal on this doesn't mean that you push your parents away as you grow older. It means that you can still seek counsel from them and adjust what that relationship looks like. So I would say your authority shifts, while secondly, your priorities change. There's a couple of people who raised their hand. They're married. Several of you raised your hand. You're dating. This is huge, and the biggest thing that we could probably say is once you get to that point where you do take that next step and I found my soulmate and my spouse for life, that becomes your priority number 1. And that's not abandonment from your parents, that's following God's design. Your spouse becomes your greatest earthly relationship. And so it's understanding how to handle those family dynamics as they start to change. It's okay that they do change. We're going to talk about, I think, as we move on, some of the questions, but that it's okay. It's okay that they're adjusting. You follow that thread, just like every relationship that you've had in life.
That's good.
You have any thoughts on that? Okay.
That's really good. Yeah, I like that idea that sometimes change is immediate, but transitions take longer, or maybe it's vice versa. I think transitions sometimes would be immediate, but change sometimes takes longer. But yeah, I kind of like what you said. I remember I was talking about with my wife. When you get married, guys, that becomes your new immediate family. So your relationship with your mom and your relationship with your brothers has to change. And so I'm sure your understanding of Ephesians 6:1 has, has maybe changed over the years as you've gotten older and now you have your own family. But I want to ask you, maybe we could throw Ephesians 6:1-4 on the screen. But what does honoring parents now look like? What does honoring parents look like while you're making your own decisions?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think if we can be honest with each other too, I think sometimes it has a cultural effect depending on how you grew up. My wife and I grew up in your normal Western American culture of our home, to where it's like the parents are almost like, please get out of our house. And some of you may be in an Asian cultural home where it's like, we hold on to family and we want to be together, and let's like have 3 or 4 families living in the same home like for the rest of our lives. Like, this is who we are and this is how we've been raised. Those are 2 very different dynamics to deal with. And so you have to understand what your family's cultural context looks like. But I think if we leave that verse up there, there's 2 really, really key words in this: children, and then it says obey. And when we see that word children, it is exactly what we would think of as a child. It is somebody who is under the governing home of their parent while they are still being raised. That's a child. Children, you are 100%, you are commanded to obey. But then I love how then Paul tells the church here in verse number 2, he's like, if that's not you, here's what you do. Honor thy father and thy mother, which is the first commandment with promise. And if you understand what this verse is saying, it's saying that obedience has a season, but honor is supposed to be for a lifetime. You obey your parents when you're in their home as a child, but as you begin to take responsibility for yourself, you don't stop listening to them. You don't stop honoring them. You don't stop getting advice from them. So I think those 2 things can definitely coexist without fracturing that relationship. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the question was how do you honor your parents when you're making really big decisions? I think a way to do that is to keep them in the loop. So many times I'm on my own, I can make my own decision. I get it, we strive and long and desire for this independence, but communication goes a long way. And so I think just if you brought somebody home, it's like, yeah, this is my girlfriend or my boyfriend and I love them, I'd be like, what? I didn't even know you were dating, Or wait, you got a new job? I didn't know this. Or you picked up a new class? Like, especially now from the perspective of a parent, I want my kids to tell me everything. I love it when I'm like, and then what happened after that? And then what did you say to her at the lunch table? Like, I want to know all the details.
Stalker mom.
Yeah, I definitely have I want to know everything, but I don't think that's ever going to stop. And that's not a bad thing. It's not like we're trying to have distant relationships. Yes, I may be moving on, and yes, I'm transitioning into an adult relationship with my mom and dad. I remember how to go through that of, wait, you don't tell me what to do anymore, and I can do whatever I want, but that doesn't mean like I'm not going to just not tell you what's happening in my life. As a parent, they still want to be involved, and they still want to hear all the good things and the bad things. So I think a way that you can show honor, keep them in the loop. Just communicate what's going on. You may not see eye to eye, and we're going to get to that, and they may not even be on the same, like, well, I choose to go to church, and they may not be believers. Okay, we can talk about that, but they still want to be involved in your life as much as possible. And so I would just encourage, keep that communication open and keep it constant all the time. You'll never regret having a close relationship with your mom and dad.
100% agree.
So good. Okay, so I've realized this in my own life too, but how many of you guys have realized, sometimes when you're making the college decision, you're choosing, who you're dating, or you're jumping into your career, maybe your parents don't like the decision that you've made or something that you're starting to do. Many of you guys are starting to realize that. And so we would call that disagreement, right? Is there a way to, I guess, respectfully communicate disagreement with your parents?
Yeah, I'm going to jump in on that one. First of all, when you enter adulthood, you're gonna disagree with your parents, and that's okay. That's very normal. We're talking about Ephesians, and it says, honor your father and mother. Honor doesn't mean you always have to agree. Honor means though that you value them and how you speak to them. First and foremost, remember that you're a Christian. That's your first calling, is that you're a believer. And so as a believer, I'm going to make sure that I have respectful conversations with my parents. If I know that I'm going into a conversation that we may not agree, I would encourage you to bathe that conversation in prayer. You're going to want the Holy Spirit leading you in that, knowing, I know we're probably going to come out of this not agreeing, so Holy Spirit, please lead me and give me wisdom. Sometimes those disagreements happen just on the spot. Oh, okay, here we go. We're going to be at it right now. I would pause and still pray and say, God, give me wisdom. Just some common sense things as I'm a Christian and a believer, and I want to represent that. We're never to raise our voice. We're never to yell, name call, lie, twist the truth at all just so for our gain. If we want to be treated like adults, then we want to make sure that we're acting like adults. And mature adults don't do those things. Proverbs 15:1 says, a soft answer turneth away wrath. There are things that I do differently than my mom and dad still to this day. There are a lot of things actually that we do different, and that's okay. They're still my mom and dad. I'm not so concerned about the thing that we disagree on. There are conversations where we had to say, we're going to agree to disagree, and that's okay. What's more important is the relationship. I'm still going to reach out to my mom and dad. I'm still going to call them. I'm still going to love them. I still want to have a healthy relationship with them, even though I know that we do things differently.
Yeah, I'm tag on and then we can move on, Steve-O, to make sure we get through everything. I think it's something that even we have tried to train our own children, that even when there is a disagreement, you are still to be respectful in your communication. And the one thing that we teach our children in our home is no matter what somebody does to you, you are still 100% responsible for how you respond. And so we tell our kids, like, if somebody comes up and they slap you in the face, they should not have done that. But now you still get to decide how you respond, and that is on you. And if you respond wrongly, you will be in trouble. I don't care what they did to you because you are in control of yourself. So when disagreements come up with your parents, understand, like, even if you feel like they are in the wrong, because guess what? Even if you have really good, godly parents, it sounds really bad to say this, they're not always going to be right on everything all the time. And so you may have a disagreement where you feel like, I know that God is leading me to do this, and this is how I'm going to go, and it's causing a disagreement. You're still to be respectful because you're still responsible for how that conversation goes.
That's good. Did you guys have to set any boundaries in place in order to maintain healthy relationships with your parents?
I really wish there was somebody else sitting in the seat for this answer. I think because as we talked about this and they had set some of these questions over ahead of time, we thought, like, we actually were blessed with really, really good homes and parents and not intrusive. I do have a picture that I do want to show you in a second. Hold on, Austin, in the back. So spring break for our school is coming up here in a couple of weeks, and I got this great idea. And I told Natalie, I said, I found where we need to go. We try to do something every year with our kids. And I said, I found a place in Utah. It's Zion National Park. And our family loves hiking and being outdoors and doing all the things. And so hold it on that picture for a second. And so I said, there's this hike and da-da-da. And I was like, and then what I want to end on is this amazing hike called Angel's Landing. And so we're like, okay. And then we ended up looking up Angel's Landing. And it is the second most dangerous hike that you can do in all of America. And we wanted to take our 9-year-old on this. And so let's go to the next picture. I think there's a couple pictures on there, Austin, as it scrolls through. So here's something. Leave it on this. We found out that this hike, it has a guardrail. That's what the guardrail is you walk up. It goes, I think at the peak, it's like 4,500 feet or something like that in the air. And the only thing holding you on from falling thousands of feet to your death is that little chain link that goes up to literally the top, the Angel's Landing. And you can cycle through the next couple and then go off of the picture. You asked the question about boundaries, yes. Steve-O. Boundaries are like guardrails. They're not walls. When you set boundaries in place for your family and yourself moving forward, you're not keeping people out. Good boundaries are guardrails to keep people safe and to keep relationships healthy. You're not trying to keep people from you. So I think, yes, anybody as you move forward, you have to create boundaries. And I think for us, we're just being transparent. It was a little difficult to answer this because our parents have been so good at, our parents almost to the opposite side of be more involved, like call us more, text us more, like FaceTime more. But for our family, I think, yeah, there's going to be a few different types of boundaries. And I think it's just understanding, number one, we already mentioned this, if the Lord leads you to get married, that becomes your main priority. And it may be you have to say no to some of your parents' family functions or things that they're doing because you need to make sure you're focusing on your spousal relationship. And that's okay. And so I think that there are boundaries that you put moving forward, but I think even as you talked about it, what happens if that becomes like a disagreement as well, right? I think that's hard because you have to understand that you're going to disagree at times. And I want to give you this one thought, and then I'm going to pass it on to my wife. I've been talking too much. But the idea is, if there's boundaries and if there's a disagreement, what does that look like? And it's like, man, this can be difficult and it can be hard, but don't sacrifice your convictions just to keep the peace in your family. If God has led you to be faithful to church, or if God has led you to do something in ministry, serve, whatever it would be, don't sacrifice convictions God has laid on your heart just to keep the peace in your family. By them watching you be faithful to what God has asked you to do will actually build trust inside of that relationship.
Yeah, I love the spiritual aspect, and I really do think with boundaries and family, it really comes with your life stage. If you're single right now and it's just working and schooling or whatever, I think you don't really need to have as many boundaries because your priority would probably still be your family and then what life goals you have ahead of you right now. I think it really starts getting tricky when you start dating and you're spending less time with family and more time with another priority. And I think that's when sometimes parents can be like, well, wait a minute, still spend time with us. And you can graciously and lovingly say, and hopefully they support you in the fact that you're dating and moving on to the next life stage, which is really great. I think for us, we didn't really have to set boundaries until we got married. My mom growing up was my best friend. She's still my best friend today. And so all of a sudden...
What?
Oh, yeah, and you. That's what I'm talking about. I'm still learning boundaries. So when my mom calls, I'm like, oh, it's my mom, my best friend. I'm so excited. And I see my husband calling on the other line. I'm like, oh, do I answer? No, we're really in this good part of this conversation. And there have been times I didn't answer. And my husband's like, were you talking to your mom? I was like, I was, and she really needed to talk to me, babe. And so I'm still learning boundaries of, okay, my mom is my best friend, but now who's my higher priority? It's my husband. And now I have kids, and so it's like, okay, Mike is my priority, then my husband, and then my parents. And so it's not always a bad thing. It's like, man, I'm choosing between two goods. It's just recognizing your priorities and your priorities in your relationships. And if you were to ask my mom, she would love to come with us on every family vacation we ever took, and that has been a boundary. My husband has
That's
been
not okay.
Yeah, he said no. And so I said, Mom, we love you. We will invite you when we want you to come, and I secretly want you to come too, to all of them, but we still need to have our family of 6 times 2, and I love that too. So I think boundaries come within your life stage as well, and being mindful of that, and then just knowing your priorities of where you are with your relationships.
What is it? We've said it the whole time, right? Assess and adjust where you're at and figure out what... I think the last point we get into, Steve, was going to lead into a lot of the spiritual aspect of it, but you got to know what God wants for you and then follow that plan.
That's good. Okay, we're running a little bit low on time, so let's move to our last segment. Last one deals with mainly the future. So moving forward, where God's leading. Let me ask you both. How did your family and marriage impact your future?
Let me jump in. I think that one of the things I think, no matter where you come from and no matter what your family upbringing looks like, or then marriage and whatnot moving forward, I think it's really important to understand biblical concepts of who I hang out with and who I spend my time with is going to shape and direct and inform who I become. And so it's even understanding in that familial aspect of if your parents are what we would feel, man, good God-fearing people, and they're going to be helping shape that for the rest of my life and my marriage and my kids moving forward, or if it's like I need to figure out what that looks like and distance a little bit just because I know where God is going to lead me and my home and my family. I think you have to then take an introspective look and understand, right, that he that walketh with wise men shall be wise, but a companion of fools will be destroyed, and figure out what does that look like kind of in your family context moving forward. Healthy family and marriage relationships don't limit your future, they refine it, and they make it exactly who I think God wants it to be. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we can answer this quickly because we've kind of answered it in different versions maybe today. But how do they impact your future? Like Mike said, we both were blessed to have we both were raised with a mom and dad in the home. We both have Christian foundations. So we understand that we were really blessed in how we were raised and how it affected us. It launched us into adulthood in a really healthy way. We were very stable young adult, pretty much. Of course, we made a lot of mistakes, guys. We're not perfect, but we had a really great, strong foundation. And we understand that that's not everyone's story today. And so I know some advice that we had gotten before was, maybe that's not your story today, or maybe you've had some things that didn't quite go the way you wanted. What you can do with that is, well, if I didn't like how I was raised, and maybe it was because it wasn't within the spiritual or whatever it is, then don't raise your family that way. Then take it and learn from it, as opposed to just be upset and bitter about it. And I don't think anyone is here, but sometimes if you didn't have the opportunity to be raised, some people were raised in a single family home and that's out of your control, and your parents did the best they could. We understand everyone here has a story, but you can learn from your story as well, and then do your best in having what God created for you in your future.
That's good. Okay, 2 more questions and then we'll wrap it up, guys. But so we talked about how family and marriage obviously impacts your future. So outside relationships influences God's will for your life, right? But how did you discern God's will for your own life? Does that make sense? Let me ask you, Mike.
Yeah, I had a quarter that I flipped no, I'm just kidding. I think for us in our life, it's going to sound so simplistic. And I wrote this down and I was like, I wish I had man, that was like the best answer ever. In all honesty, I have not wanted to make any major life decisions without knowing that God was behind it. And I could take you back all the way through high school, in college. In college, I was playing basketball, and between my junior and my senior year, they pulled the basketball program. And one of my high school coaches was in another college, and he's calling, like, come play for me. And I'm thinking, I'm going to go. And I'm like thinking, okay, now I got to figure out what I want to do. And I took a morning, and I don't tell anybody, I cut some of my classes, and I went up into the mountain, and I was overlooking the city. And I remember just praying, and like, God, I really want to do this, but is this selfish? Like, you said you'll give us the desires of our heart. I'm probably taking that out of context. Like, how do you want me to live? And it was literally that day in the chapel service in college, the preacher got up and he was like, listen, some of you here, you've done 3 years and God wants you to stay here and finish. Like, he had no idea what I was going through. And I was like, man, God used that moment in my life to solidify that. And because I stayed for that 4th year, I got to meet her dad and grow closer to him, who was a teacher, who asked me to come intern. And the rest is history. And we met each other all because I followed God's leading. And whether it's moving our family across country, which we've done several times, and it's realizing it's not just affecting me. It's affecting my wife. It's affecting our 4 children. There's no way I'm going to make those decisions unless I know that God's behind it. And how do I know that? We all know this. How does God speak to us the most? It can be through preaching in songs and all of this, but it should be through his word. And if you're not taking the time to daily be in the Word of God, you're going to miss out on what he's trying to tell you. And so I can trace every major life decision that I made back to a time when I was in my devotions and God clearly led what we were supposed to do. And I wish it was like, oh, it was this great answer. It's as simple as following God's leading and listening to what he has for you. So I would say align it with Scripture and with wise counsel, right? In the multitude of counselors, there is safety. My pastor growing up always said multiple times, go find yourself someone more spiritual and wiser than you who agrees with what you're doing. Oh, I'm going to go ask my buddy because I know what he's going to say. No, find someone who is more spiritual and wiser than you and ask them and see what they have to say and make sure that those 2 things align, spiritual and wise counsel. So that's kind of how I approach major life decisions.
Okay, let's close with this question. If you could talk to yourself again when you're in your 20s, what are you, like 27 now?
I wish.
Yeah, you're still a young adult, right, Mike?
Yeah, I feel like a young adult.
All right, if you could talk to yourself in your 20s, what's a piece of advice that you'd give yourself, your younger self?
Yeah, I thought through this, and I'm going to make this one quick. I thought through that, and I was like, man, I wish I had this, and I wish I had that. And I thought, what's the one lasting impact that I can leave on the young adults during our session today? And it's not something that I guess I wish I knew. Stephen, I'm changing it a little bit if that's okay. It's actually something that somebody told me. And if you remember, I was telling you I was in my sophomore, junior year of college, and that's when kind of the light bulb went off for me, and I decided this spirituality thing, like I've got to make that for me. I can't run on my parents' faith. Well, it's because it was a conversation with my dad, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do in life, and I knew for me specifically, he wanted to call me into vocational ministry, the Lord did, and I was battling that, and I was like, man, maybe I want to go be in the military, and I was like trying to figure all this out, and I wasn't hanging out with the best people, and so I was trying to reshape my life, and I remember a conversation I had with my dad, and I was sitting with him, and he's like, now how's life going? And I told him basically almost word for word, well, it's good because I'm hanging out with this person, and I'm trying to do right, and I was basically gauging my spirituality off of the people that I was hanging around, because they're good people and they're doing what's right. And I'll never forget. So the one piece of advice I have for you, my dad looked at me in my eyes, and I'll never forget what he said. He said, getting close to people who are close to God doesn't make you spiritual. Getting close to the God they're close to makes you spiritual. And it was like that light bulb went off for me. I was like, I can't just be hanging around with good people. I have to become that person myself. At the end of the day, young person, what your life looks like from this day forward, 1,000% is going to be directed by how close your relationship with Jesus Christ is. And I know it sounds so simplistic, but at the end of the day, that's really what it's all about. So that's kind of a piece of advice that I did actually get in my young adult years that I think really reshaped really even to where I am today. What about you?
Yeah, if I could leave you guys with one thing, I think I would just want to encourage you that there are no timelines in life. And what I mean by that is, I've already said, set your goals, make your plan, and execute them. But so many times I think in culture and from the world today, we get pressured to move through life fast. If I'm in high school, hurry, graduate, and what college are you going to go to? Or what trade school? What are you going to do next? And once you're in college, well, what's your career? And then, well, when are you going to get married? And once you're married, well, when are you going to have a kid? And I feel like there's this noise that constantly pressures us to go to the next stage, the next stage, and next life stage. And I just want to encourage you guys, enjoy exactly where you are right now. If you are working a job, if you're going to school, enjoy it. If you're married, enjoy it. There's no timeline of, oh, I have to get married by this time. When I graduated college, it was so popular for everyone getting married, and I wasn't even dating anybody. I had nobody in sight. Mike had not entered my life yet. And I spent 2 years being single, and I loved it. Those are some of the best years of my life. But being married now is still...
That sounds really bad. You should rephrase
years of my
that.
life. I'm just saying, enjoy where you are right now. Life is a wild roller coaster. You literally have to buckle up and just hang on. It's so fun, but don't pressure yourself of, I gotta get a job, and I've gotta get married, and I gotta do this. And some of this is completely out of our control. As a woman, it's out of my control when I'm dating someone or not. If some guy's gonna come ask me out, don't live with that pressure. Enjoy where you are right now in your journey.
So good. Well, guys, let's thank Mike and Natalie for sharing their wisdom with us today.